welcome Liz Lee. She's the founder of Lee Consulting. And I typically don't do the whole bio thing right off the top. I like to ask my guests right away to tell us the story of how we met. And this is an interesting one.
Unconventional, that's for sure.
Well,
Well,
or maybe
first,
the
thanks
most
for having me,
conventional thing of all, right? This is how the world should work.
especially in business. Yeah,
Yes.
we met through a mutual connection on LinkedIn. His name is Kemp Edmonds. Very talented individual. Connected the two of us. We had a quick chat, and there really seemed to be an intersection between our efforts where Jordan's working on the marketing side of things, and I'm working on customer success, where things happen after people have signed on that dotted line.
Yeah, and shout out to Kemp for connecting
Yep.
us. I guess we have a similar customer in common, and I mean like a ideal customer profile, not an
hmm
actual customer crossover, but I find that part fascinating because typically customer success is something that I hand off to.
Yeah.
Marketing obviously worries about churn and retention and things like that, but it becomes your problem, which leads me to my first proper question. What's the most important aspect of customer success?
Yeah.
And what should a founder of a tech company be worried about when they do sign that new user or customer?
The first thing that any CEO should be worried about, even before they've signed that new user, is the onboarding. 78% of customers determine whether or not they're going to renew with you in the first 90 days. Sometimes they don't even know they're doing it. It could be unconscious or conscious. But you have about 90 days to prove your value, and that's a much shorter window if you are an app or something where you more plug and play, where it's more product led. So the first thing that any CEO should be worried about is that onboarding piece, how you will go about connecting the sales team, the marketing efforts to the sales team, to the customer success team. What does that look like? And what is the customer experience after they've been sold? So that onboarding piece sets the tone for the tenure of the relationship. That would be the biggest thing that I would be worried about. And everyone in customer success will tell you that the biggest contributor to retention is onboarding. Like I said, that's 78%. But if you go back and you do an audit on the accounts that you've lost, I guarantee you at least half of them, and that's a personal experience anecdote, had something to do with a rough or a tumultuous onboarding.
Hmm. How do you develop a good onboarding sequence, or I guess maybe a customer success plan in general?
For onboarding specific, I have a template that I use with all of my clients. It has drastically changed their retention rates. And the reason for that is because it's not just a list of things that you have to do, but it makes you sit down and ask the question, what do we need? What is our value as the company getting out of this, each task that we have? But also, what is the customer's value that they're getting out of this? And that's where the term that I coined, value milestone, comes from. A value milestone is the mutual realization of value between the customer and the company, because you don't want to give away the farm. Uh, you also want to make sure that other people are seeing that value, as well as the accountability component. Uh, like you pointed out, what is the biggest point after the point of sale? A lot of those questions where you're a little murky, a little gray, comes down to the roles and responsibilities. Do you have a proper RACI in place? Is it appropriate for the task that is happening? So the biggest one is having your onboarding documented, having it be scalable, repeatable, and measurable. And my template is the one that I recommend. When you're looking, and I think the second part of that question, actually, can you repeat the second part of that question?
Well, I asked both about the onboarding and looking at customer success more holistically as well.
Right, as that strategy piece. That's what it was. Thank you. The strategy component of it, a lot of times a business plan will be made without customer success being in the room, because companies don't feel they need to hire customer success until they have a few clients in the door. That's like saying we don't need sales until we've sold someone. You know you have to onboard people. You know this is a critical part of your retention. And if you can prove retention, you are much more likely to get investors to get funding over any of your competitors. So having that strategy piece, even if you're in beta, is a huge component to getting that funding. So having someone with a CS background, even if it's a fractional position, making sure that someone who has that CS experience and expertise has a seat at the table in the beginning is paramount to creating a proper strategy. Because there is no one size fits all. Your offerings are different, the flow is different, but there is that 80-20 rule that you can apply here where an experienced CSM or a fractional customer success person would be able to lend their expertise to your business plan so that you do start future proofing as opposed to the firefighting that happens when people don't give CS a seat at the table when they're creating their business strategy.
Hmm. I often advise my clients, because I tend to work with a lot of technical founders, as I'm sure you do, to remind them to talk about the benefit to their customer and to talk about the warm feeling in the belly they're going to get when they're living the life of using their product and having their life made better, and to start by talking about those things. But in terms of how, like, maybe the dovetail between marketing and customer success, when's an appropriate time for marketing to start talking about product and features and using it?
Right out the gate. If you
Yeah.
buy something, you want to use it. So in the beginning, if you're first starting, you'll have the general idea of what your product's supposed to be able to accomplish. So you can put two or three things together to help with that from a marketing perspective. When you get, I'd say 20 or so new users, I'd start breaking it into different pathways, seeing who's using what if you have access to that information. That's why a partnership between customer success and the development team or the product team is important. So you can access data and usage data from day one. When you get to about 100, you should probably have about 2 or 3 ways to onboard, depending on the type of customer you're going after. So start catering the onboarding to the business problem, not necessarily the size of the organization, the industry of the organization. So one thing that's been emerging that I have seen with my clients is, yes, we have our ideal customer profiles. They're invaluable. They're great, absolutely great for selling. The ideal customer profile, once they've been sold, should be based around the problem that they're trying to solve with your solution. So that's to say, company A and company B are both $10 million clients. But company A wants more efficiency, company B wants expansion. Just as an example, their onboarding shouldn't be the same. Even though their sales ideal customer profile is the exact same, their problems and what they're solving are different. So you start breaking out your clients into different onboardings based on their challenges or based on what they bought the solution for. So that's where marketing would get involved. They're the best at creating these ideal customer profiles. So your customer success team should be working with marketing in the very beginning to help send the right collateral to onboard them correctly when you don't really know who's going to be doing what, when you're getting those first couple of customers. And then you should be taking a much closer look between 20 and 100 customers to start figuring out what those different onboarding pathways should look like.
Hmm. Tell me a story about a product or maybe a feature of one that helped users really get stuck in and get excited and stick with the product because they were getting that value.
It's usually the ones who have those solutions answered right out the gate. So just like support, you have an SLA, you're supposed to respond within X amount of time. With our customers, you have X amount of time to deliver that first value. And there's this misconception that there's this one sticky moment, this one light bulb moment, and I'm addicted to your product. And maybe you are that product where you've just revolutionized the market and you have this new thing, and my life is 100% easier because of you. And that's fantastic. But for most companies, it's incremental sticky moments. And that's where that value milestone piece comes back in, is when the company sees that value and the customer sees it. But when the customer sees it is important. If they bought in January, we can't wait until August for them to see that value. So you need those incremental pieces. And so a client that I worked with, they had the company's called Telemetry TV. We were finding that students and schools and school districts or counties, if you're in the States, were really great to go after. They utilized this system very well. So what we started doing was creating usage solutions with the package, featuring homecoming, or the homecoming package, featuring, oh gosh, what were they? It was a few years ago now, but tailoring it to the students. Football day, report cards are coming out, end of school. So we're starting to pre-create these templates and just gave them away for free to existing customers. Usage went up. To new customers, adoption was higher because we pre-built what they would need and just didn't leave that guessing work to them. So we identified that one of our ideal customer profiles after the point of sale required announcements for students. We created those pre-packaged solutions, shared it with them. Maybe it was sports day, maybe it was homecoming, and the adoption and the retention went up because of it. It was huge. It was fantastic. Another company that I was working with, they actually got funding because they could prove the inflection point where the numbers went up, because they identified the part of their tool that was most, not necessarily most sticky, but where engagement started to increase. And then they showed that the 3 steps thereafter increased that stickiness. So they became a fully sticky product or service. So to summarize, unless you are revolutionizing an industry, there is no one thing you can do that will make it sticky. It's the incremental sticky moments, those value milestones on a consistent basis, that makes a company sticky.
Mm-hmm. If there was an opposite to customer success, I suppose it's the word churn, that dreaded evil churn that is a problem, especially with bootstrapped founders or pre-revenue, or probably pre-funding founders. Churn hurts, right? It's yes. Awful. So how can founders avoid the churn problem?
In the beginning, the reason that startups, early stage funding has that churn is because their ideal customer profile for this sales cycle isn't fully fleshed out. They are so excited and have to prove themselves so much so that they say yes to everyone. So churn happens before it even reaches customer success. I would say if you're an early startup, usually 70 to 80% of that churn is attributed to selling to the wrong customer. And then not only are you losing that revenue, and we know it costs more to replace a customer than to just acquire a new one or sell an existing one, because the man hours that went into it, the time and effort from an administrative perspective, way more expensive. Start saying no up front. If they don't fit, no. I am telling you, I'm empowering you now. This is CEOs, sales, VPs. I am empowering you right now. Start saying no up front. It's better to have zero revenue than negative revenue in your investors' minds. Then once you get them, the reason churn happens is because there was a terrible onboarding. It was clunky. There wasn't follow-up. Something was missed. And then you actually, once you tackle those two, you make those a priority, you start saying no, you're focusing on your onboarding, a lot of the churn actually becomes non-preventable. It's natural churn. Somebody was acquired, someone shut down. Maybe somebody was let go, That's one that seems to creep up, but it's never more than like 1 to 2% of your churn. So it's 1 to 2% of the 30%. So the biggest contributors to churn, not saying no upfront, not having your onboarding solidified. Biggest reasons.
Hmm. How do you look at customer success differently if it's a product led growth model with self serve as opposed to like an enterprise sales model or like looking
Mhm.
at early stage, the founder led sales model?
Yes. Those are equally as important. So a lot of people end up thinking that if it's self-led, it should be so much easier. There should be less investment in it. Why is it costing so much? So the first thing that I wanted to point out to people about this one is that they both pretty much cost the same. They both have the same amount of investment. It is hard. It is very hard to set up self-serve. So the first one is calling out that they are very different and they need different approaches, but they require the same amount of investment, whether it's time or money. When it comes to product-led self-serve, I know it's expensive. Please, I am begging you, please get one of the tools that walk you through those guidance tools where they have the bubbles that pop up and say, here's where you're supposed to go. Because as much as we test it, run it by our families, our friends, the trusted users, people will find interesting ways to use their product or use your product if they're not guided through that process. Use the WalkMe's of the world. WalkMe is one of those guidance tools. For the enterprise sales, this is a luxury experience. They expect a human on the other side of this. Making sure that you have that availability, have the human capacity to service them after you've sold them is just as important. There should be someone there to do a kickoff call. There should be someone there to answer their questions because they're not being guided through that self-serve. There should be training sessions. So in that one, in enterprise, that luxury experience should still be there. In the product-led approach, the tools should be there to help with that guiding. But there also has to be a human being to set up those tools so they work properly and maintain it and update it. So both of them have that huge the investment and the human approach that I was talking about, just different.
At what point should an early stage startup start thinking about making their first customer success hire?
I would love for that hire to be before they've sold, especially if it's an enterprise scenario. You need someone to be able to walk them through. You also need someone who's contributed to the creation of your business plan, of your go-to-market plan. How are you going to retain people? Because it's not enough just to have a great idea anymore, and it's not enough to share how much of the market you can monopolize. You now have to prove that you can keep your share of the market. So there should be some resource, whether it's advisory or frontlines, a part of the company from day one. In regards to execution, if it's product led, you might be able to get away with it for a little while, just having the development team use the guidance tools and having that support team. You can probably get away with it for a bit. With the enterprise, I don't think you have that same luxury. These are not hard and fast rules. This is a personal opinion. But having gone through it, worked with the betas and worked with the Fortune 500s, you need a human being who has the time.
That's like an account manager or
Yeah, you
something.
could
Yeah.
have that. Yeah,
Mhm.
but they need to be following the onboarding. You need the human being to execute on that component. And in the beginning, the CEO, you're the sales rep. You are out there selling this company. You cannot take that on. As much of a superpower as you are, and as much as you can get those tasks done, odds are you can't get them done at the time the customer wants it. So the whole point is having that person available to do it when the customer wants it. It has nothing to do with the ability of the rest of the team. It has everything to do with the availability for that customer. So sooner rather than later, get someone in a CSM position for that enterprise offering.
Mm-hmm. And what should they look for in that first hire? What should that first hire look like in terms of experience,
Yeah.
seniority?
Yes. That depends on the company, and I hate those answers. So if you're a startup and it's
Give
more,
me some examples. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
100%. So if it's very industry specific, it's more nuanced. For example, I worked for a financial modeling company, an on-demand financial modeling company when I was a frontlines worker. I had no right being in that role. I know a modicum of finance and I can have a conversation, but to know what to do in the individual cell on this sheet for that, no, too much. I didn't know the equations for these things. So if there is an industry, it is a very, very specific role, I would go for somebody much more senior. And I would go for a senior person who has the soft skills. Maybe they've actively chosen not to be in sales, or they're actively choosing to leave sales, because that tells me they not only have the soft skills required for customer success, but they also have the industry experience that'll be needed. To get that person, you will have to pay more. In a startup environment, that can be very challenging. So you'll have to find that balance of how much you're willing to train that person if they don't have those things. But definitely look for those two things. A little more experience when it comes to industry specific, and has those soft skills, usually in the form of sales or leading sales.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to maybe more of a product-led one, it's a bit easier. We have the guided implementation. You can go for somebody much more junior. And the things that I would be looking out for if they were more junior in, say, transitioning from university. Did they lead projects when they were in university? Do they volunteer? Were they a part of team sports? Ask them something about what they're working on outside of work. These types of things tell you if they will go and do things on their own, or if they're going to need a lot of training and more ushered through the process. Because when it's your first hire, they need to be able to deal with ambiguity. They need to be able to pick something up and run with it. And they need to be comfortable not asking for permission, but just going. So an inexperienced person isn't as comfortable with the last one. So finding someone who's done those projects before will be paramount. The biggest thing, though, across all of these roles is their ability to extract information. So if you're having a conversation with them and they have the boilerplate questions about your company and they don't really dive deep, or they don't ask about more qualitative questions, they don't ask qualitative questions, they only ask the quantitative, that would be a red flag for me, because you need someone who doesn't need the yes, no, 100% answers. You need someone who's going to pull some of that information out of me, because let's face it, figuring out what a customer needs 2 years down the road is challenging. Figuring out how to get someone to share information with you when they're onboarding can be challenging. So how they ask their questions, if they're diving deep into it, those are the things that I'd be looking for.
Is there a question that I should be asking you that I haven't asked? Now I'm scared.
You're safe. You're absolutely safe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But if you were interviewing for a position and you wanted to be in a customer success manager role, I would be listening for, did they want to know about our financials? Did they want to know about our processes? Did they ask questions about our customers and how they interact, what they like? So if we were interviewing Jordan, I'd expect you to ask something about our clients. But in this, you're safe. I promise I won't tell.
That's good, because I've come to the end of my questions. Do have one more, and it's the most important one, is how can people get a hold of you if they want to work with you, Liz?
Absolutely. So my email is the easiest, liz@eleeconsulting.ca. So that's liz@eleeconsulting.ca. The thing that will probably not be a surprise to this group is I've created an onboarding offering where people come together in a cohort, about 3 or 4, and we walk you in the course of a month, once a week, through the creation of an onboarding process. So you have others like yourself you can bounce ideas off of, and you can use my proven framework, that template that we alluded to in the beginning, and you can circumvent that 30% churn that seems to follow every tech company that's starting up.
Excellent. Okay. And of course, I suppose they can also reach you the way I did, which is on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yes.
Look for Elizabeth Lee. Thank you very much for being on the show. I really appreciate this. It's always interesting for me to look at the problems that are outside of marketing, but are obviously crucial, and the kinds of things that founders, especially early stage, need to be worried about. So thank you very much for your time, Liz. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was great. Look forward to chatting again.